Hey scholars, this is a lecture video that accompanies chapter 5 on nonverbal communication, so it definitely is in your best interest to have read that chapter prior to listening to the lecture video and going through the PowerPoint. So basically, this is, like I said in class, this is sort of simulating what's going to be happening, what would have happened in class. I'm going through the PowerPoint, so I'll be referencing the slides, obviously, that are from the PowerPoint presentation, which is in the same module as what you clicked on this link for. So that slide 2 asks what is NVC? NVC is nonverbal communication. An easy way to make sense out of it, what the authors talk about, is signaling meaning through behavior other than words. So that's the key. The key phrase is signaling meaning. So we're not talking about random stuff. Um, nonverbal communication can be a little bit ambiguous and hard to interpret, but the point is that we're using nonverbal messages, nonverbal behaviors to transmit meaning to another person. Through behaviors other than words. So you can think of all kinds of examples. Think about what you do with your friends, or even like the emojis that you send, right? Or the things that you send in a text message or on social media. Those are all nonverbal examples of nonverbal communication. Or just think about the way that you interact with people in interpersonal conversations, the way you use facial expressions and the eye behavior, raising your eyes, frowning your eyes, smirks, laughs, sighs, grunts, all that kind of stuff. They're all different ways of communicating some kind of meaning to someone. And sometimes it's sort of subconscious too, but the point is it's nonverbal. Section 3, or I mean, sorry, slide 3. So slide 3, we're talking about now the nature of nonverbal communication. So some people talk about the degree to which it can be intentional or unintentional. So imagine a classic example is, you imagine you're walking by someone on campus. Let's say you're walking by someone on campus and the person winks at you. You walk by them, you make eye contact, and they wink at you like this, a wink. The question is, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're trying to signal some sort of romantic interest? Even though nowadays people don't really wink a whole lot, but let's say historically that could indicate that someone's trying to communicate some sort of romantic interest. But it's also possible that there was something in my eye, right? Or I had too much caffeine and my eye is twitching, and you looked at me and I happened to blink my eye. But you've probably been in situations where you locked eyes with someone and you made some sort of face, and they interpreted it in a way that you did not intend. So it was unintentional. They might have interpreted a romantic interest. They might have interpreted sarcasm. They might have interpreted anger, and then from in your mind you're thinking that's not at all what it was. You just saw me in the wrong particular way. But then the person would falsely assume, they falsely attach meaning, or they prematurely attach meaning to some sort of nonverbal behavior that you exhibit, and as a result there's a miscommunication. This happens quite a bit in interpersonal relationships. The person says, oh, you make a certain face, and they're like, oh, how come you're making that face? How come you're angry? Or how come you're not taking this seriously if you're having a conversation? And you're thinking, like, what are you talking about, right? It just so happens that you might have subconsciously made a face that had nothing to do with what the person was saying. Hence, not the nature of nonverbal communication can be intentional or unintentional. There's this concept called leakage cues. And leakage cues is sometimes we might make a certain face, right? I'm talking to someone, talking to one of my kids, or I'm talking to a person, and I'm trying to determine whether or not they've been telling me the truth, right? Sometimes there's a leakage cue, or maybe not, it doesn't have to do with telling the truth, but it might be something you're trying to hide a secret. You're trying to like surprise someone, like, oh, hey, we're trying to throw a surprise birthday party. But sometimes someone will have a leakage cue. They have this like uncontrollable nonverbal behavior where they're making a look of fear or happiness, or you just kind of you're looking at someone and you're like, you're hiding something. It seems like something's off, right? You're not being straight with me. As evidence in like eye behavior, your eyes get bigger. Not your eyes, but the muscles around your eyes get bigger. Your eyes open up. Your pupils can get bigger or smaller. Like the overall countenance of a person's face can change, and it indicates that something else is there, right? That's a leakage cue, like you're leaking something, right? Your face is telling me that you're leaking something. another way to think about what we're talking about here. All right, slide 4. It's ambiguous, and the ambiguity of nonverbal communication is kind of related to what I was just talking about with the degrees to which it can be intentional or unintentional. Slide 5, we also tend to trust it more than verbal communication. In other words, if someone is, if we're unsure about whether or not someone's verbal communication is contradicting the nonverbal communication, like the picture of this guy right here, if he's my coworker and I say, hey, how are you doing this morning? And he's like, I'm doing great. I said, are you ready to work? He's like, yeah, I'm very excited, very energetic. And I'm like, looking at his nonverbal communication, his nonverbal behavior, his facial expressions, and the fact that there's a discrepancy, there's a channel discrepancy. And so I'm gonna trust the nonverbal behaviors more than I do the verbal behaviors. You might be talking on the phone with your friend and it's someone that you know really well, and they're saying, you're like, hey, how was your day? And they're like, oh, it's fine, it was good. And then something seems off about it. Like they're telling me their day was good, or they're describing something, and I'm hearing what they're saying verbally, but the tone of their voice, the rhythm, the way in which they're speaking seems to suggest otherwise. So what research shows is when that happens, you tend to defer to trusting that nonverbal communication more than you would the verbal communication. Hence, actions speak louder than words is kind of where that expression comes from. So the question is, why do we rely more on the nonverbal communication? That slide 6 there. And then slide 7, like I just said, actions speak louder than words. So what research shows is that our nonverbal behaviors are generally a truer manifestation of our feelings, which means that it's more authentic. And so the logic of that is that oftentimes our nonverbal behaviors, like the degree to which we exert nonverbal behaviors, is below our level of consciousness. It's sort of subconscious. I'm not trying to make this face. I'm not trying to do these things with my hands or with my posture or with my body might seem tense or it might seem relaxed. You know, I might seem slouched over. I might be doing things with my eyes or my mouth. I'm not like thinking about it. It just sort of happens. It's sort of subconscious. Hence, it's a truer manifestation of our feelings. So, which also stands to reason that it's also more authentic. So you've probably had uncontrollable laughter, right? Sometimes there's something that's so funny that you can't control yourself. Given the context of, hey, maybe you're not in a situation where you should be laughing. Like, I can't help it. The feelings I have right now is that this is so funny and I cannot control it. It's authentically expressing how I feel, which, like the joke my friend told me is so funny, or the situation is so funny, like I can't control it. So that's kind of an example of what that means there. Slide onto slide 8. So that's the nature of nonverbal communication. Now we're talking about the functions. Like, what do? They help to manage interaction. They help to reinforce things. And then, of course, they can be substitutes. So instead of, I might use nonverbal behaviors to manage my interaction, where I'm talking with a group of friends, and hey, if I want to get my point across, even when you're talking with your group of friends, it's an informal conversation. Sometimes I want to speak up. So you might do something like, you kind of like raise your hand. Not that you're like raising your hand like, hey, I'd like to say something, but you're almost like making a gesture or like you're making a gesture with your hand and or your mouth. And you're probably subconsciously aware of this, but pay attention to this next time you're talking with a group of friends. Like, when someone wants to speak up, oftentimes they might just make some facial expressions or do something with their hand, or they clear their throat because they want to like speak up or something. Sometimes you have to interrupt someone for managing interaction, talking with your hands. They help to reinforce things. So I use nonverbal behaviors to reinforce a verbal message. And then sometimes they can be substitute. Like, I might say like, oh, this food like tastes so good, and I like rub my hand on my belly, or like, oh man, it's amazing. Or like, and you like pound your fist into your hand to like talk about how serious you are about something. If you're the coach and you're talking to your team about how you gotta like work really hard, right? I'm reinforcing a verbal message. And then substituting is, instead of a verbal message, I just have a nonverbal behavior. So I can walk by someone and wave. And by waving, that's substituting the message of hello, right? So pretty basic stuff in terms of the functions. So another like function to think about is deception. So meaning we will oftentimes, if we're trying to determine whether or not someone is lying, we rely on nonverbal behaviors. What some research has shown is, or what's research reports is, oh, if you're talking to someone, you ask them a question, and then they look up and to the left or they look up and to the right, that means they're lying. I can tell you that there's no scientific research that supports that. That's completely bogus, right? Or it's an erroneous extrapolation of some research findings. The bottom line, the sort of joke is the only way to know that someone is lying, or the only way to know if someone is lying, is if you know the truth. So that's sort of the joke. In other words, it's very difficult to determine deception based on just nonverbal behaviors. If you have a best friend, you know someone, there's someone that you've known your entire life, and you're like, I know when they're lying, right? I know when this person's lying. Well, that's different versus if I'm a police officer and I'm interrogating someone, it's very difficult to know if someone's lying because I'm questioning the person and they're exhibiting all these nervous behaviors, and I might confuse those behaviors or I might assume that those behaviors are indicating deception, which they might be, right? You're in an interrogation room, police officers asking these questions. If it were me, I'd be a little bit nervous. I'm sure I'd probably be doing things subconsciously, like, tapping my feet, putting my leg up and down. I might be sweating. My face might be flushed. I might be stuttering a little bit, like I'm scared, right? I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. And a person who is guilty might be exhibiting the exact same behaviors, except one of us is telling the truth and one of us is lying. The nonverbal behaviors are the same. So you see that thing that says Othello error, slide 9. Othello error is that. Othello error is the idea that a person who is telling the truth, a truth teller, is exhibiting signs of nervousness, and a person would mistake those signs of nervousness as signs of deception. That's the Othello error. And that is one example of why it's very difficult to determine deception, just based on nonverbal behaviors. So a better way to determine deception is by basically tracking someone's story. Like, things aren't adding up. Like, you're telling me one thing. Like, if I'm trying to determine deception, if I'm trying to ascertain the degree to which someone is lying to me, I'm not paying attention so much to their nonverbal behaviors as much as I am to the story. Like, that's how you actually determine deception. Like, okay, you said one thing and it's contradicting this thing, and things aren't really adding up. And so when I rely on that, usually I'm right. If it's just based on a facial expression, like I don't rely on that unless it's my kids, because I know my kids. I've been seeing my kids' facial expressions since when they were born. Slide 10 is more something that we would do in the classroom. So we're talking about immediacy. Immediacy is a concept that it's basically when two people meet, there's what's called psychological distance, right? It's kind of related to uncertainty reduction theory. So it's a review of something we talked about in the past. Two people meet, there's psychological distance. I don't know you, you don't know me. And what research shows is that when we engage in immediacy behaviors, when we're exhibiting immediacy behaviors, that reduces psychological distance, creates psychological closeness, and it just creates sort of a trust. But it's through this nonverbal behavior concept called immediacy. So immediacy is when you're exhibiting these cues in appropriate ways. So proximity, body orientation, eye contact, facial expression, gestures, posture, touch, and voice. So you could, as someone who's interacting with someone, like if you want to know if someone wants to have a conversation with you, if you want to communicate to babies or infants their love, if you're on a job interview, if you want to try to increase your selling capacity, you would in a positive way, in a structured, strategic way, in an ethical way, you would exhibit these things. You would utilize these immediacy cues. So proximity, you'd want to be speaking with someone in closer distance. Your body orientation. The more that your shoulders are kind of squared up to someone, the more you feel kind of close to them. Too close and it might feel intimidating. So there's just the right sort of angle of how your shoulders are squared up to someone else. It's easier to demonstrate this in the classroom. Eye contact, like exhibiting consistent eye contact with someone, but also part of like appropriate eye contact is knowing when to break the eye contact. Because if you're looking at someone in the eyes for too long, there's a moment when it gets a little bit awkward and you're like, well, what do I do? Well, you just sort of break the eye contact and you look at other things in the room. It shouldn't be choreographed, but it's something that kind of comes naturally. Appropriate facial expressions, appropriate gestures, talking with your hands, your face, posture. It's always good to be sitting up straight. Touch, there's appropriate touch, and then utilizing your voice. If someone is, if someone appears to be sad or you're trying to make a point, sometimes a light touch on the arm or somewhere between like the shoulder, the top of the shoulder, down to the wrist. Research shows that's like an innocuous place to lightly touch someone if it's for the purpose of like I'm trying to create psychological closeness. In many cases, people are unaware that they're even touched. Slide 11 is expectancy violations theory, which is the idea that we all have expectations for social behavior based on what's predicted to occur. And when people violate those expectations, we have what's called an expectancy violation, right? And the violations can lead to positive or negative arousal based on all kinds of things, based on who the person is, the communicator, my relationship with the person, and then the context. Positive violations can be good, and then negative violations can be bad. There's things called high rewards and low rewards. So maybe you're the kind of person. Here's an example. I'm going to a job interview and I'm meeting my prospective, my potential future employer, my potential future manager. So that person has this high power. They have high rewards. The context is I'm in an office. It's more formal and whatnot, corporate setting. Let's say it's a corporate setting. The relationship is I don't really know this person, but the communicator, the person, is the boss, right? And so what's predicted to occur? I walk in, I shake hands. That's pretty common. That's predicted. So if they didn't shake my hand, if the person says, "Hey, I don't shake hands," I might consider that a negative violation. Or I go out to extend my hand and they say like, "Oh no, we don't shake hands." Like, oh geez. Or you go out to shake their hand, and then the person says, "Oh, we don't shake hands here. We hug," and the person gives you a big old bear hug. That might be a violation because you're definitely not expecting that to occur. That's not predicted to occur because the expectation is for social behavior is based on what's predicted to occur. You don't expect that to occur. It's not predicted. So it's a violation. But you might consider it. You might be uncomfortable with the hug, but you're like, yeah, it could be a positive violation because this person is the boss and I don't feel threatened at all. It's just a little out there, right? But the person has the potential for high rewards, right? They're the boss and I made a good impression. And then, maybe the HR person is like, "Oh, hey, we're sorry about that. We told him he's not supposed to hug people." And you're like, "Oh, that's okay. No big deal." All right. And you get the job and all is well, right? That's just one example. So that's expectancy violations there. You can see how that applies in many different contexts. Something expected to occur doesn't happen. Person violates that expectation, and it can be a positive violation or a negative violation. Slide 12 is all the different codes and types of nonverbal communication. The textbook lists all these. A lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward. I encourage you to watch this video. This is a video from his name's Alex Lyon. He's a professor at a school in New York, I think Syracuse, some university in Syracuse, and he has a website. His website is listed on our Canvas page as a useful source. He's a professor, but then he has tons of videos on all things related to communication, and his videos are more geared towards some like up and coming leaders. So it's more like he does a lot of consulting. So the potential audience or the typical audience are people who are in management, who are working professionals, but it's obviously relevant to college students. But I encourage you to watch this video to kind of get a different perspective, a different understanding of gestures and body movement, specifically kinesics, postures, and gestures. Slide 13. Another code or type of nonverbal communication is facial expressions. There's a concept called SADFISH. It's just an acronym, not having anything to do with the emotional state of a fish. SADFISH is an acronym standing for sadness, anger, disgust, fear, interest, surprise, and happiness. which are said to be universal facial expressions of emotion. So the idea is that anywhere you go in the world, if you go anywhere in the world, depending on no matter the culture, they might exhibit sadness, anger, disgust, fear, interest, surprise, and happiness different than the way that we do, different from the way that some other culture, some other country does. But the common denominator is those 7 facial expressions of emotion. And this has changed. Or some scholars say there's 8, some say there's 6. But the point is, there's a handful of emotions that are expressed through facial expressions, and that's what SADFISH stands for. Slide 14, eye behavior. So eye behavior is a very interesting thing. Marketers, researchers, advertisers, they capitalize on eye behavior. So there's all kinds of research that looks at that does retina tracking. So there's people who sign up for research studies, and then they're tracking their retina, and they're seeing, like, based on your age, maybe you're a kid, maybe you're a teen, maybe you're a tween, maybe you're a generation, whatever. And if I show you a cereal box, or I show you something, some sort of product, where do your eyes go first, right? If you look at a box of cereal and there's characters on it, there's figures or something from a movie, where do your eyes go first? And how much time are you spending on each character within that box of cereal? And then where do they go second? So what researchers doing, more like, this is not so much our field as much as it is like computer mediated communication, like communications, advertising, that kind of stuff. They'll be tracking your eye behavior, and based upon your eye behavior, they will strategically market things based upon your eye behavior and things like your age and your background and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, they make money, basically. So eye behavior is very important. There's a lot of power in eye behavior. Touch is haptics, slide 15. Haptics is the word for touch. That's that which refers to touch. It's a very powerful form of nonverbal communication. On to slide 16. So voice. So voice is it might sound almost like contradictory, right? Your voice is part of nonverbal communication. Voice, you would think, is verbal communication, like the words that you're speaking. But there's a concept called paralanguage. Another concept is called vocalics. Not paralanguage. The way it's explained is the nonverbal aspects of your voice. Vocalics deals with any vocal auditory behavior that has the potential for meaning. That's what vocalics is. I'll say that again. Any vocal auditory behavior that has the potential for meaning. So the tone of your voice, the rhythm, the pace, the pitch, the volume, all the different ways that you use your voice, or lack thereof, is an example of vocalics. So even and like all those types of things would be, or like a sigh, like or anything like that would be an example of vocalics. It's a vocal auditory behavior, something that comes out of your mouth that you can hear. Anything that is related to that is an example of vocalics, and that is an example of nonverbal communication. It's behavior that has the potential for meaning. There's a still face experiment on slide 17. I encourage you to watch this. This is an experiment done a long time ago, but it's basically looking at the importance of eye behavior and physical closeness between a mother and her child. It has a happy ending. So when you watch this video, there's a moment where the baby starts getting kind of sad and starts crying, and as an audience, you might be thinking like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, go back to the kid." And she does. It ends well, right? But the point is that to see how quickly the baby gets so detached and doesn't know how to handle herself, and then as soon as the mom gets back, it's like this magical, powerful thing where like it makes everything better. This is to illustrate the power of nonverbal communication, specifically the power of touch and mutual engagement and interacting with someone. It's a mom and her baby, but just because she's a baby doesn't mean that you don't still need it as a grown-up, right? You still have that need and desire for physical touch, for physical closeness, psychological closeness, mutual eye contact. And when we don't have it, we don't respond the way that the baby does in the video, but we feel like there's something missing. And that's the point of watching the video, to illustrate the power of that. Slide 18 has to do with space and environment. So space and environment, the way that we relate to space, the way that we utilize space and environment. If you have a roommate and you're living in a dorm, then this is especially relevant for you. Like, how does, do you draw a line down the middle? If you look at slide 19, do you draw a line down the middle? This is your half of the room. This is my half of the room. I'm going to utilize this space however I want. I'm going to decorate how I want. Leave my stuff on the floor how I want, and you do what you want. But it's like, that's how I use space. Proxemics is part of this whole thing. Proxemics deals with the way that we derive meaning based on how we relate to space. So page 116 talks about that. Proxemics has to do with proximity, and basically it's how we relate to space. Slide 20 has to do with Hall's 4 zones of space. It's kind of like when we're interacting with someone. Hey, if you're like a foot away from me, that's intimate space, and the context basically determines what's appropriate. If we're in a classroom, hey, and you're 12 feet away from me and I'm talking to you, that's okay, that's normal, because we're in a classroom of 25 people, and you're in the back, and you have a discussion question, or you're asking me a question, or you're making a contribution to the class, or you and I are talking for a little bit. Like, that's normal. But you're 12 feet away. That's a public distance because it's a public classroom. But let's say you and I are on campus. Let's say if I see you on campus and I'm like, hey, so and so, and then we're talking. Maybe we have some small talk for 5 minutes. If we're having small talk for 5 minutes and you're 12 feet away from me, that'd be pretty weird, right? I mean, I would think that'd be really weird if I just wave and say, hey, how's it going? Good, how are you? And keep walking. That's not weird. But if we're carrying on a conversation and you're 12 plus feet away from me, that's pretty weird. So the way that there's all kinds of factors that contribute the degree to which we think, like, this feels good. The space that's between you and us, between you and me, is appropriate based on my relationship to you, how many people are in the setting, where we're having this conversation, in the library versus in a classroom versus we're outside, we're at the beach, we're in church, we're in my car. So we all have sort of preferences for space based upon these factors: intimate, personal, social, and public. Slide 21 has to do with close talkers. Basically, it's just, this is the thing to make you laugh. But just imagine, right, in this short clip from Seinfeld, imagine if someone is talking to you this close. Like, what do you do? How do you respond? Every so often, I'll run into someone who is a close talker, and it's just like, I'm not upset or angered, but it begs the question, like, how do I respond to someone in a competent way with regards to close talking? And the last slide, slide 22. When we're talking about space and environment and proxemics, that is your environment is a code of nonverbal communication. Your face is a code of nonverbal communication. Your body is a code of nonverbal communication. How you dress, the way you dress, wearing jewelry, or like, not wearing, but having tattoos. I guess you could call it wearing tattoos. It's a permanent thing that you wear. But your body is a code. Your face is a code, but your environment is also a code. So considering the physical environment as a code of nonverbal communication, imagine going into these different professors' offices. What's being communicated? It's weird to think of like a physical space as communicating, but if you look at the top left picture, it looks pretty sterile. What might that communicate? All kinds of things, right? The person is a minimalist. They only like the bare minimum of things. Maybe it's like kind of creates a feeling of like it feels sterile, almost feels like it looks like it's cold inside. Look at the top right picture. And there's research on this topic, by the way. There's research that will survey students and say, like they ask students to report on visiting different professors' offices and what they look like and how it made them feel. It's not so much at Cal State Fullerton as much as it is like places like LSU, where I was working for 5 years. But when you're in a professor's office like the one on the top right, look at the lighting. It's kind of like warm lighting. It looks comfortable. There's lots of books and there's lots of stuff in there, but it's all nice and orderly. There's pictures around. There's a comfortable couch. And if I walk in there, and let's just say there's some nice mellow music playing, I feel very comfortable in there. It would change. It might even like lower my serotonin. Not serotonin. My cortisol, my stress hormone. Increase my serotonin. I might just like relax me. I might feel more comfortable in a professor's office like that, based upon me. Maybe you feel less comfortable in there. Maybe it feels like it's too methodical or whatever. Look at the professor's office on the bottom left. looks like it's kind of a mess, right? There's stuff everywhere, right? But I've met people like this who have a super messy desk, or a super messy office, kind of like mine. I have stuff everywhere, but I kind of know where everything is, right? That's just I'm like scatterbrained in a way personally, but I'm also very orderly. Like I kind of have I sort of have a place for everything. Um, but I don't have a I guess I don't care that much that it looks nice and orderly. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but a lot of times it's, if you look at my office right now, like my actual desk, there's just stuff everywhere. I mean, once every while, once in a great while, I'll clean it up, but then it just kind of goes right back to that. But the point is, when you're in an office like that, when you pay attention to those kinds of things, if you pay attention to those kinds of things, it might change how you feel, maybe for the better or for the worse. Maybe you're in an office like that in the bottom left, and you're thinking, I like this because this is what I'm like. I'm kind of messy. So it's nice to know that there's other people who are like me, especially my professor who's a working professional. So that is sort of an overview of the highlights from nonverbal communication. As I mentioned in class, there would be a Canvas assignment. So there's no Canvas. I'm not going to do a Canvas assignment for this topic, but instead, what we'll do in class during week 8, which is on, we'll be covering the chapter 6 on communication and culture. I will integrate nonverbal communication into that. So like what you learned from your reading of chapter 5 on nonverbal communication, and then some of the stuff I covered in this lecture video and the PowerPoint, I will integrate that into what we do in class for nonverbal for communication, because there's a lot of layover between nonverbal communication and intercultural communication, because the nature of intercultural communication is theoretically and practically intertwined into the components of nonverbal behaviors. That'll make more sense as you read the chapter and as we talk about it in class. So that's it for this lecture video. Hope you're all doing great. Talk to you later.